Do you want to know how to make modern Android app with MVVM architectures and architecture component with latest trends in Android? Then stay tuned with me. Hello world, this is Saurabh here and you're watching Code Vlog. And if you're new to this channel, I make videos on how to make modern Android app with the latest trends in Android. So make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you never miss a video, and stay tuned with the latest trends in Android with my channel. So let's dive into the video. Before I begin this video, I want to talk about my previous video, which is my first video on my channel. So I'm going to thank everyone who have been viewing my this first video and getting a subscribe to my channel, and thank you for that. I really appreciate it, and it's really mean a lot to me. So today we are going to talk about how to use view model, live data and data binding with the MVVM architecture in Android in Kotlin. So first of all, I want to describe this MVVM architecture. This MVVM architecture is used for structuring your codes and classes to make your work easy and organized in Android Studio, and it is one of my favorite framework for depending on app building. So why I'm so depending and so preferring this MVVM architecture, it is removing my pain points on boilerplate codes from my work. And one of the main advantages for using this MVVM architecture is the view model classes. View model class really helps in many of the cases and many of the scenario for managing the states of the life cycle and your data classes as much as modular way to convey the app codes. So it's really makes an Android developer lives easy. This is my medium articles and story for making this video, so you can get this article if you prefer read and learn approach for learning. So you can go through this story. I will provide the link of this story in the description below, so you can get it and read it. And so what is the problem with the traditional apps which has why they have been introducing this view model classes, data binding and live data? So major problems are like configuration changes. For example, if you are changing the screen orientation, it is one of the configuration changes. And second one is the hassle of debugging this boilerplate codes. In the traditional one, they are adding all of the codes in the activities and fragments, and they are making a lot of methods to divide those codes, and it's really a large after the completion of the project and completion of the app, it's really a lot of methods and codes. So it's really confusing to go through the code and debug some of the bugs and find the solution for it. First one is a configuration. In this configuration changes, if you see here, we have this one app, as in if you click on this button, it will automatically adding a one number into this counter. So it's handling the counter. If and this value of this counter is stored in the variable. So whenever you click on this add button, it's increment that value and showing that value in here in the text view. So if you rotate this screen, you will see the data is not showing here. So that means that screen orientation changes, configuration changes has occurred, and that data has been lost. So that's the problem with screen orientation and configuration changes, and many similar problems like this has been facing by the Android developer. So there is a one solution with this kind of a problem is on save instance state. So what this do is if you can save the states of the variables or save the state of the datas into it, and whenever the any of the configuration changes occur, you recover that data from this on saved instance state whenever the state is stable. So it is one of the approaches, but it's not that reliable. If you have the many of the variable inside your activity and fragment classes, and you have to handle that all of the state, it's really boilerplate codes and lots of boilerplate codes you will be generating. So, and it's really confusing if you have many of the line of code and you have to debug that. It's really confusing. So here is the solution is for that is the view models in activity and fragments. What this view model do is it's modulate the business logics of your business logic codes, like incrementing. In our case we have the business logic code like incrementing the value of the variable. So this is a business logic. So this was business, this kind of a logical codes has been transferred to the view model classes, and updating the UI, like whenever it's increment the value, it should be reflect that value changes in the UI. That kind of UI logics has been defined in the activity and fragment classes. So before you begin to code, there are some dependencies you need to add it in your Android project. So open your Android Studio project and go to this build Gradle script, and here there is a build.gradle for the module app, and add all this. This is a data binding dependency, and here are the life cycle dependencies. So you need to add that. You can get all this dependency code from my article, from Medium article. When you are all done with all the dependencies, then I'm going to walk you through this all of the XML files and all of the classes. So basically it's have single activity, and here it is an XML activity, and here you can see I have built this UI with the constraint layout. And if you want to know about more in the constraint layout, how complex UI can be built with drag and drop and with the easiness of this Android Studio tools, so you can get my previous video, you can check out that. And over here I have this one counter text view. This will going to show the counters values which has been incremented by this button. Whenever you click on this button, it's going to be increment the value of that counter. So this is simple. And now this is main activity. So this main activity is our UI, or you can say view category of that MVVM model. So here you can see we have one variables var counter. It is the flag which is holding our count value, and here it is the text which has been assigning that counter value to this the initial value for the first time. And then you can see here I am on the click of the add button, I am incrementing +1 in the counter and adding that counter value or updating that counter value in this click. So here you can see these two are different codes, because if you see here it doesn't depend on any of the UI kind of thing. So it is our business logics which I have previously told you that this is going to be our business logic, what we are going to do whenever the users interact with the UI, that underneath operations are known as our business logic. So logic, and this is our UI updation code. Whenever the logical operations perform, any of the user change in that values, it should be reflected to the UI. So that's the logic of UI updations. So if you can see, we can differentiate that these kind of codes in two different categories. So the concept of view model will come into picture with this logic thing. So how we can made one view model for assigning this and handling this views. So first of all we need to create a class. So you go to the parent package name and just right click on that and select new Kotlin classes and make it, I'm going to name it as main activity view model. Here our view model class has been generated, and I'm going to extend that with view model. Here it's a object, so we have to give the parenthesis, and here we are going to use the live data. What live data do is, whenever any kind of a data changes or any kind of a data which is been contained by that live data, it will automatically be observed by the life cycle of any of the activity or the fragment, that the life status of that variable or that object which is contained by the live data is updated, so you can get the latest status of that data. So how we can declare the one live data? Private var, and going to name it as counter, and its type is mutable live data. I'm not using as simple live data, because if you give it as a simple live data, it will be not updating the value, because only live data only can observable, not going to be put the value inside that variable. But you can do that by using mutable live data and observing the live data of that thing. Like what the type of our variable is, integer int, and I'm going to assign it as mutable live data. Then we are going to assign a default value to it, like counter dot post value is equal to 0. So in our case we will be defining as a default value for the counter is 0. Then if you want to get the observer for this live data, so you have to make a function for to get that value, because I have declared it as a private, so we have to create a public function to get the observer for the live data, like get function get count, and the return type would be live data. So I have told you that live data can be observed by the life cycle owners, like activities and fragment. So this would be our preferable example. And now with the parenthesis we are going to return the counter. Now we will be adding the setting variables. So we don't need to set the variable from the life cycle owner from the activity, but we want to increment the value, so we will do that business logic from here. So we are defining it as increment and here we are going to increment the value counter dot post value counter dot value plus is equal to 1. So I'm taking this null operator because it may be the null, because in Kotlin we can't define the null variable. So with this I am telling the compiler that it is not going to be null at the runtime. So it's been incremented with the +1 value. Now we just have to observe the value with the current changes, and we need to replace all the code with our view model thing. So first of all we need to declare a view model object where view model, you can see here we are getting the suggestion for this view model. Main activity view model, and it is the late init, so we are going to initialize it later on. So we have to add the late init keyword, and one thing we have remaining with this is we have to use the data binding. So what data binding we have added in the dependency here, what data binding do with our UI thing is it's making our UI accessible with a much easier way, because in traditional way we are using the find view by id with lots of the variable extension, and we have to make that variable if it is null or not, then and many kind of boilerplate codes. So it remove that boilerplate code, and we can directly access the UI objects from using this data binding library. So by using this data binding library, in order to use this data binding library, we have to change our xml file. If and you go to, first of all you go to this xml main activity main xml, and press alt enter and convert that into a data binding layout. So you can see here we have converted this data binding layout, and after that we can get the data binding object, data binding layout object, not data binding object, lead to in AR, and binding, and it will be type of activity. And here you can see that activity main binding, the sequence of that keywords of binding class which is generated by the data binding library is like first the activity keyword, then your class name, like in my case has been the main activity, so it will be main, and then the keyword binding. So it's the sequence with the binding class. Then we are going to replace this set content view with the binding one. So binding is equal to data binding utils dot set content view, and here it is adding on one extra parameter with this is what is the lifecycle owner. So sorry, not lifecycle owner, that's a activity or the activity class object, current instance of that object is asking for it in the parameter. Then we are going to assign that layout, which layout we have to bind with this binding object. So in our case r.layout.main activity layout main. So binding is done. So now we can replace this all code with this one. So already we have implemented a view model but not initializes the view model. So we have to initialize the view model object. View model is equal to view model provider, then what is the lifecycle owner. So this is the lifecycle owner, so this main activity is the lifecycle owner. So we will be adding the current instance of the main activity in this, and we are going to get the class of that view model. So main activity view model and class.java. This view model object is also initialized. Now we can observe the life status of this counter. So in order to do that, we have to view model dot get count. You can see here that it's having the get count, and now we can observe this. And observe, we have to give the owner lifecycle owner, and after that we can observe through this. And what we have discussed in that previous one, that we have to update the counter whenever the counter changes. So we have to reflect the changes in the UI. So how we can do that is like using this counter TV text view. So we are going to initialize the text view with the text of it dot to string, because it's a integer it will be so we have to cast it into string into, so in case we have to show that in text view. So you can see all this code is removed, and that counter one is also removed. So in case you have to count you are thinking about how we can count the increment the value, so that is also been done by this. So in our case we can access the binding value, so we have to access the UI through binding one. So this binding dot counter TV, you can get the UI object through binding object dot that ID of the widget or ID of the UI element. So you can see here that counters underscore TV is the ID, and we are getting that in binding object. Then after we need to change this also, button 1 binding dot add button dot set click listener. Whenever it's click on this button, it will accessible through this one. As this is a data binding one, so we have to do like this way, and we have to increment the value by you in order to do that, ViewModel dot increment. So it will increment the value, and whenever you increment the value, it will give the observer that there is a new value in the counter, so you need to change that value to this, and you want to show that value in this text view. So this is the way the view models and data binding and live data are been working. So this is the my thought process of making that use of view models and live data and data binding, and this is a small case use case. So I hope you can get the idea of that how many of the code has been removed from here. So if it is a large line of codes, so you can imagine that how many lines of code can be eliminated by this approach. So now we are going to run the app. I'm going to skip that Gradle building. So now the Gradle is built, and you can see the output. If you click on this, it will increment the value by 1, and if you rotate that phone, it will change it. You can see here the value is not lost, so the data is not lost. So this is the solution for that, this data loss, and this kind of problems can be resolved by using this view models and modular approach for building up the modern Android app. Now I want to show you something about that data binding, how we can remove this, eliminate this code of showing the data from using this view model observer, and we are going to show the data through the XML expression, so that this line of code can be eliminated from here. So this kind of things can be implemented by using this here. When you click on this and write as variable, and you name it as view model, and we are accessing the view model of this class through XML by using a variable in data tag. Then we have to reference the view model, main activity view model. So you can see here I have added this view model in the XML, and one thing we have to do here is we have to comment this line, and we have to do that view model binding dot lifecycle owner is equal to this, because this activity is observing the life cycle. So you can give this as an honor, and we have to assign the view model of this life cycle to this one. If you see this view model is same as this one in the XML, so we have to assign this variable with our view model here, and this is done. Now we can add this expression in the XML on this text view, so that it automatically get the value from the view model, and we are getting an integer one, so we have to parse that. So integer dot toString, and I'm going to add that count. Now if I run that app, I'm going to get the same output. Once again, I'm going to cut this Gradle build. Now here you can see whenever I add this, we are getting the same output, and whenever I just change the rotation of that device, it's also remaining the same as the value. So that's it. We have done an example with view models and data binding and using live data. So that's all for this video. Hope you like this video, and if you getting some any of the value from this video, gives a thumbs up to this video, and you can get all those resources and source code from my GitHub repository. I'm going to add all the important links on my description below, and comment below your views about the view models and live datas and data binding. So keep coding and take care in this pandemic. Until the next video, bye bye.